Right, so today's video is going to be something a little bit different, and hopefully I'll just adjust that a tiny bit. Today's video is going to be something a little bit different, hopefully something interesting. Hopefully you guys are interested in this video idea. But yeah, what I want to do, I reckon I've read enough series to justify doing a kind of like ranking video, but not of the books themselves necessarily. But I did see someone, don't ask me who, because I don't honestly for the life of me remember. It's just a random video that showed up in my feed that I decided to watch. It was someone ranking every main character from every book that they had read in the last 2 years. And I thought it was interesting. I thought, I haven't read as much as that in the last 2 years, or the last year and a half, but I have read a fair bit, and I want to kind of come in here and rank or give a numerical rating, we'll say, to the main characters of every series that I've read in the last, I'll say 2 years, but it's been closer to a year and a half. So what I've read in the last 2 years is The Witcher. I've read Mistborn. I did chuck in Jazz's book, Threadweaver's book 1, The Ascendants, in there as well. I'll chuck that in there. And I've read 4 out of 5 books in the Stormlight Archive, making my way through Wind and Truth right now. I'm not going to mention anyone from the Eisenhorn trilogy because I've literally just started that. I'm about 90 pages into the omnibus at the moment, so I'm not going to even mention that, aside from mentioning that I'm not going to mention it. We're going to start off with The Witcher. So the characters that I'm going to rank from The Witcher are Geralt. The characters that I'm going to talk about anyway are Geralt, Ciri, and Yennefer. Yennefer. I'm not going to talk about the rest of the party. They are introduced way too late, and there's not enough really to talk about. If I were to rank Dandelion, who does technically appear in every book, I would give him like a 2. I did not enjoy that character at all. But Geralt of Rivia, this is book Geralt I'm going to talk about, not video game Geralt, not TV show Geralt. Book Geralt. And book Geralt is objectively a cool character. Objectively, he's a badass. Objectively, he is the coolest character in his series. Outside of that, just being like a stoic badass, I did find him annoying. I don't know if it's just the translation that kind of makes him appear to be just a whiny brat towards the end of the series. Like from Baptism of Fire onwards, he does seem like he gets more and more whiny, especially to people that are just trying to help him. People that have signed on to do this quest with him, he's just, why don't you leave? Why don't you, you should all go away and leave me to this on my own. And as characters just get more, and for some reason, the more annoying he is, the more people want to help him, which I just found Geralt as a character reading those books very frustrating. So I'm going to give him a 6. I feel like a lot of his aura and his vibe carry him for me, outside of, like, you know, going back on his word, saying that he's not going to be a Witcher anymore, and then going straight back into being a Witcher. And the overall, like, whininess does drop him a fair few points, but just his general aura and the amount of aura farming that he does throughout the series do carry him quite a bit, but not enough to get over a 6. Ciri, I'm going to give a 4. I find her very annoying. She does also fall in love with her abuser. And the books treat that relationship as a lot more normal than it actually should be. Ciri is a character that goes through so much in that series, but I don't feel like she grows. I don't feel like she becomes the character that she should be by the end of the series. She seems very much like these things happen to her, but she just becomes kind of like she goes from being a whiny child to being like a blank canvas. Almost like we're going to wipe away the personality of this character through the amount of abuse she takes. You know, she doesn't become a character that kind of looks at the world in a more marred way, which she probably should. She doesn't become this kind of paragon of optimism either. She kind of just becomes a blank slate for someone else to come along and pick up and maybe give her her own saga, which I would probably say Ciri is more of a character or has more things to do in the series than Geralt has. And unfortunately, through as much stuff as she's given, especially in the last 2 books, none of it's memorable. And I don't remember big Ciri moments like outside of her abuse. I don't remember anything cool that she does, but I do remember cool things that Yennefer does. I do remember cool things that Geralt does. So I'm going to give her a 4. And most of that is sympathy because she does get a very hard ride throughout the series. A very, very hard ride throughout the series. Yennefer, I'm going to give a 7. Because she does carry a lot of weight and she probably does do a lot more than Geralt does, really. And she probably suffers a lot more than Geralt does as well. That scene where she's like being tortured is, you know, it lives in my head rent free. It's really vivid, and I didn't like reading it, not because it was bad, but because it just gave me the heebie-jeebies. And I don't feel comfortable reading women being abused in books. Not necessarily that I don't want that in a story. It's just, you know, I'm a very empathetic person. I don't like hearing about women being abused, like, in general. It's not something that I enjoy reading in books. You know, because it is something that just gives me the heebie-jeebies quite a bit. But I feel like Yennefer as a character, she has to deal, like, her just vibe and aura. I get a lot of it is vibe and aura with The Witcher, because looking back at that series now, it was cool when I was reading it, but looking back at it after reading Mistborn, after reading Stormlight Archive, after reading things and knowing like what I enjoy in fantasy books, The Witcher, looking back at it, I don't think I liked that much. But Yennefer is definitely a standout, and her scenes, whenever she's in the book, or whenever she's in the books, I'm immediately more engaged than I would be if I was reading about. Yeah, the stuff with Geralt is fine. Whenever it's a Ciri moment, I'm just like waiting for it to end. But then, whenever Yennefer is on the page, it's a markedly better experience. I'm going to move on now to Mistborn and the characters from Mistborn that I'm going to talk about. There are a fair few more characters in Mistborn that I feel like made an impact. I'm going to talk about Vin. I'm going to talk about Elend. I'm going to talk about Sazed. I'm going to talk about Kelsier. And I think that is it for Mistborn anyway. As a whole, I feel like Mistborn as a trilogy, probably the best 3 books I've read in the last 2 years. Mistborn probably is held much higher than a lot of other things that I've read. It's much higher than The Witcher for me. It's just like I got on with Mistborn a lot more than I got on with The Witcher. When it comes to the Stormlight Archive, I think I'm more invested in the Stormlight Archive because it is, I've gotten through one more book, and Wind and Truth. I'm kind of locked into the story of the Stormlight Archive, and those characters have obviously had way more time to kind of sink their teeth into me. However, I think Mistborn is the first showing of something that I truly fell in love with as a story. So we're going to talk about Vin first, who I feel like the first book is definitely her story. It's her book. And as the series goes on, and this is something that Sanderson does in both this and the Stormlight Archive, is the main character in the first book is the main character. They still have the most stuff to do when you look at the series as a whole. But every book has a different kind of main character, has a different kind of focus character. The first book is definitely Vin's, the second book is definitely Ellen's, and the third book kind of is everyone's. It kind of ends at a place where Sazed is really important. I feel like Vin as a character is one of the most successful characters in a Sanderson book. I feel like Vin as a character, I cared about Vin by the end of Mistborn way more than I care about half of the Stormlight Archive cast. I still love that cast, but Vin as a character, I care so much about by the end of that book. And then, her ultimate sacrifice did feel really worth it, and all of the twists and turns throughout that series felt really worth it, and they wouldn't have done if Vin wasn't as strong a character as she is. Obviously getting her relationship with Kelsier, and then when what eventually happens, seeing her be able to take on this role of kind of like a leader, it was just a really solid arc to read through, and it felt really worth it when you got to the end. So Vin as a character, I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. Really, really fun character. but not my favourite character in Mistborn. My favourite character in Mistborn, probably Elend. Elend goes through the most character development. He goes from being kind of this, like, shy nerd, this very, like, in his own head kind of character, to being, you know, on an equal power level to Vind. Vind? Who the fuck is Vind? On a like, kind of equal level to Vin. Yeah, I really like Elend's arc, going from kind of a, like, almost a bit of a runt, to going to, you know, king, essentially, or like the emperor, essentially, to becoming a hero by the end of the series, and kind of like being a big part of the final like confrontation, the final, like, the big battle. I did really like Elend's like arc throughout that series. I think I'm gonna give him an 8 as well, but it's edging closer to a 9. I'm gonna talk about Kelsier before Sazed, because Kelsier for me is if Kelsier was in more of the series, he would be a 10. Kelsier is a 9. He is the perfect way of doing a, like, apprentice, of like teacher. Kelsier and Ven's relationship is the perfect teacher-apprentice relationship. You know, it just encapsulates everything, where he does take her out of this really abusive place, gives her a job, and takes on this, like, teacher role without becoming a father figure. Like, the one thing that he kind of is, like, adamantly that he's not going to do is to become a father figure to Vin. So Kelsier, for me, I'm going to give a 9. He's a really interesting, fun character. I think he's one of the best characters that dies early in a series. He's one of the best characters. And sorry for spoiling Mistborn. If you haven't read Mistborn, by the way, and you're watching a video talking about fantasy characters, there's something wrong with you. I think Mistborn is one of those, at least the Final Empire, at least the first book, is one of those books that you kind of have to read. The rest of the series, it becomes a completely different thing by the end of the series. But Mistborn is such a great trilogy of books. Going to talk about Sazed. Sazed is a really great character. He's a 9 out of 10 up until the Hero of Ages, where he does spend a lot of the time in the Hero of Ages moping and kind of just in a state of grief. And it makes sense why. I just would have wished he got out of his slump a little bit earlier. And obviously when he does, it's like at the perfect moment for when he needs to become a major force in the story. And having the twist be that he's the Hero of Ages at the end of all of this, is perfect. But a lot of the time spent with Sazed in the Hero of Ages is kind of just a bit for me. And so that's why I'm going to give him probably a 7. He's still a very good character. It's still, like, is kind of the heart of he's kind of the heart of Mistborn, and also the way that he speaks, with putting "I think" at the start, at the end of every sentence. Kind of, I was waiting for someone to pick up on that, and no one did. But I kind of like that no one did that. But yeah, I like Sazed a lot. We're then going to talk about The Ascendants, Threadweavers, Book 1, by Jazza. I'm only going to talk about the two kind of main characters in this. There are quite a few characters that are that kind of get a little bit of shine, but it's only really Aiden and Samantha Weaving that get, or Weaver, not Weaving, got nothing to do with Hugo, Weaver, that have anything really to do. I'm going to give both of them a 5 out of 10 for now, just because book 1 in the series, they don't really have that much to do. Samantha, a lot of the action sequences have to do with the other characters, and those two are kind of just there, and kind of just there to have people that are relatable watching the rest of this kind of alien invasion to kind of like Warhammer Space Marines showing up, and this big battle between like what is essentially Tyranids and Space Marines fighting each other. It's a really cool book. I just feel like the characters in it aren't that strong. At the moment, there is a lot more. Apparently, there's at least 3 more books coming, so there's plenty of time for more character development from both sides. I know that Aiden is technically dead, but he is uploaded into a mainframe, so there's some interesting stuff that you could do there that could be done in the future of the series. It's just where that is at the moment. I don't feel right ranking characters in a series that only has 1 book out at the moment on the same level as characters that have, you know, a completed trilogy, or 5 books, or 7 in the case of The Witcher. No, The Witcher has 8 because it's got... Yeah, Witcher's got 8 because there's Seasons of Storms as well. But yeah, I'm going to give both of them a 5. And then we're going to go into the series that has the most characters that I'm going to talk about. Stormlight Archive. We're going to talk about Kaladin. We're going to talk about Shallan. We're going to talk about Dalinar. We're going to talk about Sazeth. We're going to talk about Navani, and we're going to talk about Lift. The reason why I'm talking about Lift, she has her own... she has Edge Dancer. I'm not going to talk about any of the characters that are in Dawnshard, because, to be honest, the main character in that book didn't really do much for me, and Lopen isn't really a massive character in the whole like story. If any characters are given a lot to do in Wind and Truth that I just didn't talk about, then too bad. But we're going to talk about Kaladin first. Kaladin Stormblessed is the coolest character in the Stormlight Archive. Kaladin Stormblessed is a 10. I don't think I need to really explain much more than that. You know, this character that is immensely powerful, that is incredibly, like, scarred from his past, that does get kind of a big kind of thing at the end of Rhythm of War that really touched me. I think that book did more for me because of where Kaladin ends up at the end of it than it did for a lot of people. A lot of people say that book's one of the worst in the series. I wholeheartedly disagree, if just for the Kaladin moments at the end. Yeah, Kaladin's a 10 out of 10 character. I can't give him any more than that, any less than that. Shallan is technically a good character. I just 3 books she spends trying to get through her trauma, and I know it's the same amount of time as as Kaladin's. I just didn't feel as invested in her side of the story. Shallan is 100 times more interesting when she's in a scene with Adolin. And I'm not going to talk about Adolin Colin that much, but he would also be like a 9 or 10 character. Shallan for me is like a 7. She's still very interesting and very well written, and Brandon Sanderson is great at writing female characters. But I just feel like the rest of the cast of the Stormlight Archive is so varied and so strong that Shallan for me kind of falls off a little bit. She's not as interesting to me personally as the rest of the cast. She does get a lot to do. Obviously, Words of Radiance does take a lot from her POV, and it is basically her book. But I find her arc a lot more frustrating than a lot of other characters. Especially all the stuff with the Ghost Bloods as well. I find her as a character a lot more frustrating than any other character. Just for her refusal to just tell other people the truth. And she's finally gotten to that. That place at the end of Rhythm of War, going into Wind and Truth. So, hopefully, throughout the rest of the series, she's a much more interesting character. That is after the time jump, if the cast of characters we've got now are even the cast of characters that we get after the time jump. Dalinar Colin is a 10 out of 10 character. Just this, like, stoic, what is described as kind of like a mountain of a man. The arc that he goes on and the entirety of Oathbringer, which I'm now looking back at it, as much as I had issues with it while I was reading it. Looking back, Oathbringer is probably my favourite book in the series. Just looking back at it, Oathbringer probably is my favourite book in the series because of how much it does delve into Dalinar. And no, I just really like the character. Something about Dalinar Colin is just cool. He's kind of all of the cool aura, stoicism of Geralt with none of the whininess, which just makes him 100% cooler character. 100% cooler character. We're going to talk about Navani next. Navani's like a 4 or a 5. Navani is probably the least interesting part of Stormlight Archive for me. As much as like it is nice for Dalinar to have a love interest, and you know, and like it is nice that she started to get more stuff in Rhythm of War. I just was kind of waiting for her to die throughout Rhythm of War, not for any like masochistic reason or anything, but just because, or sadistic reason anyway, just because the situation that she found herself in didn't really, it just seemed like any moment she's just going to be killed. Any moment she's going to be killed. She's just put in a position where there is no way out other than dying. And the fact that she didn't die throughout Rhythm of War kind of made me think, And it would have made for a really emotional moment with Dalinar. Like, his wife dying, and he's not even able to be there. But anyway, Navani's like a 4 or 5. And then Sazeth, I'm going to give a 6, because he is really cool. And the moments when he's, especially in the first 2 books, I feel like the longer that he's spent in the series, the less interesting he's been. I preferred him as kind of like this antagonistic force that didn't have full control over himself. And now that he's kind of working with Dalinar, it's an interesting position to be in. I just feel like there hasn't been enough done with the character since the end of Oathbringer to really kind of justify him switching sides, or him being placed into being more of a main character role. And he's going to spend a lot of time with Kaladin in Wind and Truth, so I will hold out hope that he becomes a more interesting character by the end of Wind and Truth. But yeah, that is going to be it. That is every character, or every main character from every book that I've read in the last year and a half. I know I haven't read that much, but I would have been sat here for an hour if I got to the point of like finishing everything that I've got on my shelf. And plus, I wanted to do it now while I had, you know, characters from The Witcher, characters from Mistborn fresh in my head. But yeah, I'm gonna, hopefully you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the characters in the series that I talked about, today. But yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Peace. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. And over on Twitch, we're doing charity streams throughout the whole month of December. Come on over. I'll see you guys there. Hopefully you enjoyed. Peace.